And, ladies and gentlemen, there is a peculiar strength in silence that is often misunderstood. Many assume that silence is weakness, a failure to defend oneself, or a retreat into fear. But true silence, deliberate and measured, is far from passive. It is the armor of those who know their worth and refuse to be drawn into the mire of pettiness. When someone speaks to us with disrespect, it is tempting to reply in kind, to match sharp words with sharper retorts. But what is gained in such a contest? If you wrestle in the mud, both combatants emerge filthy. To stay quiet after disrespect is not to surrender, but to refuse the invitation to descend into the realm of the small-minded. Disrespect is like a spark tossed into a dry forest. It has the potential to ignite a wildfire of conflict. The initial temptation is to meet that spark with fire of your own, thinking it will extinguish the insult. But fire never quenches fire, it only creates destruction. To stay quiet, however, is to recognize that you are not obligated to fan the flames. You have the power to let the spark die out, unnoticed and ineffective. This silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. There is strength in understanding that not every slight demands a response, not every insult needs an answer. Often, the one who disrespects others is seeking attention, validation, or even a sense of control. Their disrespect is their attempt to provoke a reaction, to draw you into a moment where they feel superior. By staying quiet, you deny them that satisfaction. You send a clear, albeit silent message. You are above the petty need to engage in verbal sparring. But let us be clear. Silence in the face of disrespect does not mean submission or approval. It is not a sign of apathy or passivity. Rather, it is a demonstration of self-restraint, a refusal to let another's behavior dictate your own. It is an act of resistance against the tyranny of impulsive reactions. By choosing silence, you reclaim your power, showing that your character is not so easily swayed by the momentary unkindness of others. Imagine for a moment a tree standing firm in the midst of a storm. The wind may howl, the rain may batter its branches, but the tree remains rooted. It does not lash out at the storm, nor does it retreat. Instead, it holds its ground, waiting for the tempest to pass. Your silence in the face of disrespect is like that tree's quiet resilience. You do not need to respond to every gust of wind or drop of rain. You simply need to stand firm, knowing the storm will eventually pass. Silence also has a remarkable ability to reflect. When someone speaks with disrespect, they often expect a reaction. They are prepared for an argument, a defense, or even a counterattack. But when you remain silent, they are left with nothing but their own words. They are forced to hear the echo of their insult, unchallenged and unendorsed. In that echo, there is often a mirror, a moment where they may see the ugliness of their own behavior. The world may teach us that strength is loud, that it shouts back and stands its ground with force. But the truest strength often whispers, or says nothing at all. Silence, in its quiet dignity, can be far more powerful than the loudest retort. Consider this. Words spoken in anger often reveal more about the speaker than the one they target. A bitter tongue stems from a bitter heart. The disrespect you face says more about the other person's wounds, insecurities, and fears than it does about your value. Why then should you carry their burdens? Why allow their darkness to eclipse your light? When someone disrespects you, their words and actions often originate from a place of internal turmoil. It is rare for a person who is truly at peace with themselves to lash out at others. A person who is whole does not feel the need to tear others down. Disrespect, then, is a reflection not of your worth, but of their struggles. It is a window into their unresolved pain, their frustrations, and their need to assert control in ways that diminish others. Recognizing this truth is liberating. It removes the sting of their words, for you understand that their bitterness is not a judgment on you, but a commentary on their own condition. Their disrespect is a symptom, not a verdict. When you grasp this, you can approach such moments with compassion rather than anger, with wisdom rather than wounded pride. But compassion does not mean accepting or excusing their behavior. It means refusing to internalize their negativity. It means understanding that their words are their burden, not yours to carry. You are not responsible for their bitterness, nor should you let it alter your perception of yourself. Your light, your dignity, your worth does not depend on the approval or validation of others. It is inherent, unshaken by their attempts to diminish it. To stay quiet after disrespect is to shield yourself from the emotional weight of their bitterness. It is a refusal to allow their words to plant seeds of doubt or anger within you. Instead, you remain rooted in your own sense of self, impervious to their attempts to uproot you. In this way, silence is not just a response, it is a boundary. It says, I see your pain, but I will not let it define me or dictate my actions. There is also a profound lesson in not letting another's darkness overshadow your light. Your dignity is a gift, a sacred trust that should not be surrendered to anyone's momentary cruelty. Disrespect, no matter how sharp, cannot diminish your worth unless you allow it to. By staying quiet, you affirm your value without needing to defend it. You declare, with your silence, that their words are powerless against the truth of who you are. And in the stillness of your silence, there is also space for the other person to see themselves clearly. A disrespectful person often expects a fight. They brace themselves for resistance or retaliation, for the escalation that justifies their initial unkindness. But when you offer silence, they are left with no target but their own reflection. In that moment they may begin to see the bitterness that drives them, and the harm it causes, not to you, but to themselves. Silence in these moments becomes a mirror. It forces the other to confront the echo of their own words without the distraction of your retaliation. It is a dignified response, one that says, I will not dignify your disrespect by lowering myself to your level. When someone speaks with disrespect, they often act out of habit or impulse, rarely considering the weight of their words. They expect resistance or retaliation, and when it does not come, they are left to reckon with their own behavior. In this way, silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their actions back to them in stark clarity. It is not an act of passivity, but a deliberate choice to let their words stand exposed, unchallenged, and unmasked. Disrespect, when met with silence, loses its momentum. It feeds on reactions, on the escalation of conflict, on the back and forth that keeps it alive. But when you remain quiet, you rob disrespect of its fuel. The person who disrespects you is left with the uncomfortable truth of their own behavior, seen without distortion. In that space, they may come to realize the gravity of their actions, for there is no deflection or distraction to hide behind. This type of silence requires great strength and discipline. It is far easier to react instinctively, to hurl words back in defense or anger. But to choose silence is to rise above the immediate temptation and take the higher path. It is to value your integrity more than the fleeting satisfaction of a retort. You are not abandoning the battlefield. You are simply choosing a different kind of victory. The dignity of silence lies in its ability to convey a powerful message without a single word. By staying quiet, you are telling the other person that their words do not control you, that their disrespect cannot dictate your behavior. You are asserting your self-worth in a way that transcends the pettiness of argument. This kind of strength is unshakable, and it leaves a lasting impression far more profound than any spoken reply could achieve. At the same time, silence creates a space for reflection, not just for you, but for the other person. When we speak in the heat of the moment, we often obscure the truth of our emotions behind the noise of our words. But in silence, there is clarity. The person who disrespects you may be forced to confront the true nature of their actions and the impact it has, not only on you, but on themselves. It is in this quiet that transformation can occur. Silence does not guarantee change, but it opens the door for it. It allows the other person to see themselves as they truly are, unfiltered and unshielded by the defenses of an argument. And whether or not they choose to walk through that door is no longer your burden to bear. Your silence has done its part. To mirror another's actions through silence is not an act of indifference, but one of profound strength. It is a way of saying, without words, I see what you have done, and I will not respond in kind. I will not let your behavior define me. In that reflection, there is both justice and grace. Yet, this silence is not easy. It requires discipline, humility, and an unshakable confidence in your identity. To be silent is not to suppress emotion, but to channel it. It is to transform the sting of disrespect into a moment of introspection. What does this person's disrespect say about them? And how shall I carry myself in the face of it? This is the query. How shall I carry myself in the face of it? Silence is often misunderstood as avoidance or passivity, but true silence is one of the greatest tests of inner strength. It demands a mastery over the impulses that drive us to defend ourselves, to justify our worth, or to retaliate against hurt. To remain silent when disrespected is to exert control over your emotions and responses, choosing a path of thoughtfulness over reaction. This discipline begins with humility. Humility is not the belief that you are less than others, but the recognition that your worth is not tied to their opinions or approval. Disrespect in this sense is a fleeting shadow that cannot diminish your inherent light unless you allow it to. Humility gives you the freedom to let go of the need to prove yourself, to respond to every slight, or to engage in battles that offer no true victory. But silence also requires a deep confidence in your identity. To endure disrespect without reply is not to accept it as truth, but to reject it as irrelevant. It is the quiet assertion that your value is not contingent upon external validation. When you know who you are, your principles, your dignity, and your purpose, you are less likely to be shaken by the unkindness of others. Their words lose their power to wound because they cannot touch the core of your being. The difficulty lies in the moment itself, the sting of the words, the heat of the insult. Your emotions rise to defend you, urging you to act, to speak, to prove the other person wrong. But here is where the greatest transformation occurs. To stay silent is not to deny those emotions, but to channel them into something higher. Instead of lashing out, you turn inward, using the moment as an opportunity for introspection. What does this person's disrespect say about them? This question shifts the focus from reaction to understanding. It invites you to see the situation with clarity, recognizing that their actions stem from their own struggles, insecurities, or unmet needs. This perspective does not excuse their behavior, but it allows you to approach it with wisdom rather than impulsivity. After all, who is it to say that sometimes our own mistakes strive at wisdom rather than impulsivity? And then comes a second question. How shall I carry myself in the face of it? This is where your character is tested and refined. Will you let their words dictate your response, or will you choose a higher path? Your silence in this moment becomes an active decision, a way of carrying yourself with dignity and grace. To transform the sting of disrespect into a moment of growth is not an easy task. It requires patience with yourself and others. But it is in these moments of discipline and reflection that you build resilience. You become someone who is not swayed by the winds of others' opinions, but stands firm, rooted in your own sense of worth and purpose. Let us also remember that silence does not mean acceptance. There is a time to speak, but that time is not when anger clouds the mind and poisons the tongue. Words spoken in haste are rarely wise, but words chosen after reflection carry the weight of wisdom. Silence in the face of disrespect is not a concession. It is a choice. To remain silent is to refuse to engage in a moment of heated emotion, when words can so easily spiral into hurtful exchanges that benefit no one. It is not about accepting the disrespect or pretending it did not happen, but about recognizing the importance of timing. Not every moment is the right moment to speak. When we are disrespected, our immediate reaction is often fueled by a mix of anger, pride, and a desire for justice. These emotions, while natural, can cloud our judgment. In the heat of the moment, it is easy to say something we may later regret, or to escalate the situation unnecessarily. Silence offers a reprieve, a moment to pause and consider the situation with greater clarity. It allows us to reflect on what truly matters and whether a response is even necessary. There is wisdom in waiting. Silence gives you the opportunity to assess the situation, to weigh the significance of the disrespect, and to decide whether it warrants a response at all. Some slights are so trivial that responding only gives them undue importance. Others may require a response, but only after you have had time to gather your thoughts and approach the situation from a place of strength and composure rather than raw emotion. Silence also shifts the power dynamic. When you choose not to react immediately, you maintain control of the situation. You are no longer playing by the other person's rules or succumbing to their provocation. Instead, you set the terms of engagement, deciding when, how, or even if you will respond. This kind of restraint demonstrates maturity and emotional intelligence, qualities that elevate you above the pettiness of the disrespect you have encountered. However, silence must be intentional. It should not be confused with suppressing your emotions or avoiding confrontation out of fear. True silence is purposeful. It is the space you create to process what has happened, to understand your feelings, and to choose your next steps wisely. It is a pause, not an end. Slowing down is when the time to speak does come, your words carry greater weight because they are grounded in thoughtfulness and intention. Instead of reacting in anger, you respond with clarity. Your words are not weapons, but tools for resolution. Or, if necessary, for setting boundaries. By choosing when to speak, you ensure that your voice is heard, not as a reactionary outburst, but as a deliberate and powerful statement. To speak after silence is to speak with purpose. It is to ensure that your words build up rather than tear down, that they reflect your values and not the momentary sting of disrespect. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the preparation for a response that matters. Sorrow. The next time disrespect comes your way, pause. Do not react, but respond. With silence if needed. With strength always. By staying quiet, you are not just avoiding a quarrel, you are demonstrating a strength that cannot be diminished by the unkindness of others. You are declaring, without words, that your worth is not determined by their opinion, and your dignity is not forfeit to their rudeness. In the rush of life, it is all too easy to feel compelled to respond immediately to every slight or insult. We often feel as though we must defend ourselves to prove our value or rightness in the face of disrespect. But in these moments, it is essential to remember that you are under no obligation to engage in a battle of egos. To pause, to take a step back before responding, is not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate choice to preserve your strength. Silence in these situations is not an evasion. It is a conscious act of restraint. It is the recognition that your worth is intrinsic and does not need to be defended. You are already whole, already valuable, regardless of what anyone else may say or do. By staying silent, you are affirming this truth, not with words, but with your very presence. You show that you do not need to prove yourself through reaction or defense. This kind of strength does not come from dominating a conversation or asserting control over others. Rather, it comes from within. It is the quiet assurance that your dignity is not a commodity to be bartered in exchange for validation. When you choose silence, you stand apart from the squabbles of others, rising above the petty grievances that often define human interactions. Your silence is an expression of confidence in your identity and your ability to weather disrespect without crumbling under its weight. And while silence may appear passive, it is in fact an act of active resistance. It resists the temptation to meet anger with anger, to add fuel to a fire that will only burn both parties. It resists the urge to lower yourself to the level of those who choose to dishonor you. By staying silent, you are demonstrating that you are beyond such behavior. Your strength is not measured by how fiercely you can fight, but by how gracefully you can endure. But silence also has the power to disarm the aggressor. When you do not react as they expect, they are left to reconsider their actions. They may be confronted with the uncomfortable realization that their disrespect has had no effect on you, and in that moment their power dissipates. The disrespectful words they have thrown at you lose their potency, and they are left to reckon with their own behavior without the distraction of your response. In choosing silence, you do not just avoid conflict, you make a statement. You declare that your peace is more valuable than the noise of anger, that your worth cannot be shaken by rudeness or unkindness. And in doing so, you set a standard for how you wish to be treated, while also teaching others that respect is earned through dignity, not demanded through conflict. Let's start. By responding with strength, you demonstrate that true power lies not in how you react to others, but in how you carry yourself when faced with the challenges of life. Your silence speaks volumes, telling the world that you are not at the mercy of the opinions of others, and that you can endure without compromising who you are. Nevertheless, there are times when you do need to speak, and that is when you speak up and say, "Silence."